Donald Trump recently held a rally in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and two things happened. Much like the last time that he was here, an insane amount of people showed up to show their support for the former president. Now, ironically enough, Donald Trump was yet again in danger here in Pennsylvania, although local law enforcement, they were pretty much more prepared for any attempts on Donald Trump's life. But guys, here is the footage where you can actually hear the former president making his speech as this nut job who's just trying to rush the stage is subdued. You can also hear the crowd getting into it as the local police officers jumped this guy as soon as he showed his intent. Remember, Donald Trump got shot here in Pennsylvania not too long ago, which could explain why security was definitely beefed up. Now, it is also worth noting that he didn't even pause his speech to acknowledge this guy. And there's a different angle here where you can actually see a flag of the iconic photo of Donald Trump after he gets shot, which actually matched what he was talking about. He was talking about two American flags being blown by the wind after he was shot. Now, the flags, according to him, resembled the shape of an angel after the wind hit them. And it's kind of fitting that he was talking about this as a guy who was most probably wanted to hurt him was tased by local police officers. And we're going to get to the speech in just a second here, but Donald Trump made something absolutely clear. He does not think Kamala Harris should be voted in as president. And guys, before we get started, I just want to thank you as always for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Let's get started.
These people are stupid people that are running our country. They don't have any common sense. They believe in an ideology. And if you look at Kamala and you look at what she's done to every place she's touched has turned to shit. Every single place she's touched. Have to say it.
Now, if we're talking about the places that Kamala Harris has touched, we don't have to go any further than San Francisco. We know for a fact that the VP doesn't believe that illegal immigrants that are crossing the border are not breaking the law. She insists that these are not criminal offenses, even though the term illegal is right there in the title of what they're doing. In fact, she wasn't happy when Donald Trump talked about illegal aliens in California when she was senator. So let's just go ahead and turn back time just a little bit and remember when this happened.
The state of California passed an outrageous law declaring their whole state to be a sanctuary for criminal illegal immigrants. A very terrible sanctuary with catastrophic results. Here is just one tragic example. In December 2018, California police detained an illegal alien with 5 prior arrests, including convictions for robbery and assault. But as required by California's sanctuary law, local authorities released him. Days later, the criminal alien went on a gruesome spree of deadly violence. He viciously shot one man going about his daily work. He approached a woman sitting in her car and shot her in the arm and in the chest. He walked into a convenience store and wildly fired his weapon. He hijacked a truck and smashed into vehicles, critically injuring innocent victims. One of the victims is a terrible, terrible situation. Died, 51-year-old American named Rocky Jones. Rocky was at a gas station when this vile criminal fired 8 bullets at him from close range, murdering him in cold blood.
Now, you can clearly see that Kamala Harris is pissed off. She's smirking, but she knows that Donald Trump is criticizing her in front of everybody. And if you guys want to hear more news about good old California, or as some people call it, California, you would be pleased to know that they too are providing money to first-time homebuyers. Much like how Kamala Harris wants to provide $25,000 to a possible homebuyer, Cali, they're pushing this program called California Dream for All. And when we say all, We're not talking about Americans here, guys. That would make too much sense. AB 1840 was recently approved by California lawmakers, and it would provide $150,000 to illegal immigrants for down payments on homes. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and let that sink in for you guys just for a second, but here's Governor Gavin Newsom talking about how Donald Trump has caused this entire border crisis. I know it's a lie, but let's hear from Gavin Newsom.
They don't want a deal, period, full stop. They don't want a deal. They don't want to make this a quote unquote campaign win for Joe Biden. It says everything you need to know about the fraud that they're perpetuating on the issue of the border. And I think it is a disgrace what the Republican Party is doing, what Donald Trump is doing. And this is hidden in plain sight. He sent out a tweet or some truth, whatever, saying, kill it. Yeah. And these guys are so weak. It's so pathetically weak, this Republican Party. And the new speaker said, oh, yes, sir, what else would you like us to do? We don't care about America. We don't care about our freedoms and liberties. We care about politics exclusively at the expense of the American people, because all we care about is winning for winning's sake. That is shameful.
This is the same guy that's pushing for this Californian dream. And I went to their website to check on this text. And look at the summary of AB 1840. It specifically cites that this bill would prohibit the disqualification of applicants to California's home purchase assistance programs based solely on immigration status. I mean, you can check it out for yourself. It's pretty easy to find on any search engine, Google, Yahoo, Bing, whatever. And this is the kind of hypocrisy that we see with the Harris-Biden administration, because we know that Vice President Kamala Harris had already changed her mind about the border. But she's now walking on eggshells here because she doesn't want to offend any future voters. This is what many people believe Nancy Pelosi was talking about when she was asked about what's happening in California.
The California lawmakers just passed a law, it hasn't been signed by Governor Newsom, but giving government assistance to undocumented immigrants to buy houses. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a different place than the Democratic Party used to be on immigration, is it not? I'm not going to say that's what the country's going to do, but that's certainly where California is.
Well, let me just say, immigration had always been a bipartisan issue. I refer you to
But not free houses.
Well, that's not free housing. It's the American dream being available to more people. But understand this about immigration. The best speech on immigration was by President Ronald Reagan. This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States. I want to communicate a message to the country I love. And he talked about the Statue of Liberty and the beacon of hope it is to the world, and what America was preeminent in the world because our door was always open, and we will cease to be preeminent when we shut the door. Now, I don't do justice to the great communicator. Google it. It's a fabulous speech. And George Herbert Walker Bush continued in that respect for the diversity of America and the rest. California's always in the lead. Maybe others will follow that lead, but that's up to those states. But we're very blessed here with beautiful diversity.
So you'd vote for this law?
Excuse me?
So you'd vote for this law?
Well, I'm not familiar with exactly what it is, but making the American dream of home ownership available to all people is something we have to do for people who are here now.
This is before you're a citizen. This is undocumented. This is for the undocumented.
Well, what I would like to do is move them to documented.
This is what the left are fighting for. Critics and analysts, they're all agreeing that they're fighting for the American people. They're fighting for future voters who would ensure that they keep their positions as long as possible. But of course, this is based on speculation and the words that have come from their mouths. But to say that she would move to have illegal immigrants as American citizens, it says a lot, guys. And it looks like California is the bar for Pelosi and Harris, which means that whatever's happening will be suggested to all 49 other states. Now, at this point, does it make sense to want Trump out of office? The honeymoon phase is all but over, and all the Democratic Party can show for it is one single percentage point. I know, guys. So a recent Yahoo YouGov poll shows that Harris leads Donald Trump among registered voters, 47% to 46%. And if you're familiar with polling, this is basically a tie due to the margin of error, and the expected bump from the DNC has not come. Nope, no one freaking cared. This is despite most of mainstream liberal media just glazing Kamala Harris all over the place. stroking her ego left and right. And this is after the DNC was turned into a sort of a concert with rappers showing up and different high-profile Democrats speaking. The likes of Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and many others. And yet the numbers are still as close as ever. And guys, before we get started, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for sharing this video on social media. And thank you for subscribing to the channel. Let's get started.
An incredibly tight race between the vice president and the former president. The poll from our partners at The Hill, along with Emerson College, was taken after the Democratic National Convention, along with after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing that he's no longer in the race. All right, let's start here with Kamala Harris and where she stands with all of this right now. She leads in 3 of these swing states. Let me show you Harris real quick. So she's up 1 in Georgia. She's up 3 in Michigan. She's up 1 in Nevada. But I want you to focus on Georgia for a second, 49-48, because Democrats have only won this state once in the last 7 presidential elections. It was President Biden last go around, and Kamala Harris is trying to make it 2 in a row. All right, let's go over here. Donald Trump, he leads in 3 of the states as well. Wisconsin, up 1. North Carolina, up 1. Arizona, up 3. Again, but let's focus on the first one here, Wisconsin, because Republicans have only won that once in the last 9 presidential races. It just goes to show you how things can move either way very easily. Now, I know what you're saying. Those are 6 states, Blake. You tell me all the time that there's 7. You're right. Let me show you Pennsylvania, because that is a dead even tie in the Keystone State. And I was going through the numbers today in Pennsylvania. You see it there, 48-48. Get this. There were 950 people surveyed in Pennsylvania. The difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? 1 person. That was it.
It's even worth noting that her thunder was stolen by just 2 people, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. Both former Democrats are now supporting former President Donald Trump. Mark Halperin has now looked into the numbers, and he's doing some good old-fashioned journalism. The difference between Donald Trump and many other politicians is that he's frank. He's not afraid to say what's on his mind so long as he believes he has a point. And this man has been attacked by the media throughout his entire term. If anything, he's the one that's been criticized harshly by mainstream media. Which brings us to CNN. The news outlet isn't exactly unbiased with its reporting.
With Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, the presidential race has reset. But how much has it reset in terms of the gender gap among voters? That is what our Harry Anton has been looking at for you this morning, and he's here with us now. So set the scene. How are men and women responding to Harris? What's the big reason why Harris is gaining in the polls?
Yeah, all right. It's the gender gap. It's something we've spoken about in politics for a long period of time, and we're really seeing it here. All right, let's take a look at the national polls first. This is Democrat versus Trump margin, and I want to point out this is average across the same pollsters. Look at Biden versus Trump, women and men. What we see here is the gender gap is working in Donald Trump's advantage. He holds a 9-point advantage among men against Joe Biden, and Joe Biden only held a full 4-point advantage among women. But take a look now. Look at how the race has changed. Instead of having a 4-point advantage among women as Biden did, look at Harris's advantage. It leaps up to 11 points. In fact, men haven't changed their voting patterns at all, at least in the national polls. A 9-point advantage for Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, a 9-point advantage against Kamala Harris. What has occurred is women voters are flocking to the Democratic ticket. Look at that. Look at that. 4 points versus 11 points. That is the reason that Kamala Harris has turned this race around.
Many claim that they've now stooped to a new level where they can be considered the mouthpiece of the Harris presidential campaign. And what's worrying for Democrats is that even Bill Mayer is starting to ask, why won't she face the media? Why doesn't she want to answer questions? You also can't forget that Caitlin Collins and her point of view depends on who's signing her checks. She used to be way more conservative, but switched things up after getting into CNN.
Okay, so George Soros is this foreign-born left-wing guy who essentially wants to change the nature of our country. And in this data dump, one of the memos was about the refugee crisis. And they made 3 points. They think that they've been successful at influencing immigration policy across the world. They think that the refugee crisis is an opportunity to continue doing so. And they think the refugee crisis is the new normal. And George Soros is this guy who is a staunch advocate for open borders. He wants people to be able to go wherever they want, whenever they want, for whatever reason. And for him, he sees this immigration policy, this crisis, as a vehicle to further his immigration agenda.
But of course, this is old news, right? Collins is now focused on being a part of liberal media. All of this George Soros talk probably isn't even allowed to be discussed inside their offices. And yet, CNN wants us to believe that they're moderate. Ain't nobody buying that. Anybody got time for that? And this is a place to get unbiased reporting. Psych. This is what they don't see, because it looks like they believe their own bull. They believe that they're calling it straight down the middle. And sure, they can have both Democrats and Republicans on their shows, but it doesn't mean that their anchors will treat them the same way. And it will almost always lead them to banking on one side more than the other. And I think that's what Mayer is trying to point out here. Journalism is now being used as a tool to lift one side of America over the other. And it's not like any of these other news outlets will do the opposite, but it's something to be upfront about. That and the fact that positive messaging is used for something or someone that might not deserve it at all. It's highly plausible that Vice President Kamala Harris won't hold an interview at all with any of these networks. On that note, guys, I did a previous video where I covered the absolutely horrible CNN interview of Kamala Harris and why she's obviously not ready for the bright lights of Washington. Make sure you guys watch that. And as always, appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next one.